Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 85 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, or the DAP Network, if you will. And obviously, we will. We do it every week. Special show tonight. We got all three co-hosts here. We'll go to my chair to my right, I guess, technically my left. I don't know how you're looking at it. I got Rocky with me. How you doing tonight, Rocky?
Doing great. Excited for this show tonight. We got an awesome guest. Happy to be with both of you guys tonight. I'm just going to shut up and so we can get right to it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to be taking a lot of notes tonight. This is the best kind of show. Obviously, then the other co-host of the Dynasty Junkies, Scott Sidlow. How you doing tonight, Scott?
Hey man, same thing here. Let's keep it short and sweet, and let's give our guest the floor here because we got I had so many questions. I literally had like 3 pages that I've written probably over the last year, and I was like, okay, let's maybe narrow that down a little bit. I don't want to keep the guy till midnight, so yeah, man, let's jump right into it and hey, let's learn some shit, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, of course, in case you haven't seen, if you're watching live on YouTube or on Twitter or wherever you are, we got the one and only Matt Waldman with us this week. How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm doing great, fellas. Thanks so much for having me. And, this should be a lot of fun. It seems like a fun vibe already.
Well, and this definitely is the busy time of year for you. So we really appreciate the time coming on here. I know you do something this time of year. The last few years, you've been kind of busy with something. I don't know what it is, though. You want to fill everybody in maybe on what it is you do for everybody in the fantasy community?
Yeah, I write this little pamphlet. It's it's about 5 pages long, but it takes me about a month to type a letter at a time. It's called the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, and I've been doing it since 2006. So this is year 17. It's getting close to graduation. Amazing. Yeah. It is a publication that is devoted to studying quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And I would say it's arguably the most comprehensive look that you will get out there, either in fantasy football or in real football. It started out as kind of as an experiment that I did as a fantasy writer over at fftoday.com back in the day with Mike Kruger and Mike McGregor, and thought, let's see whether this is something I want to continue to do. And it was probably a couple hundred pages, maybe at most. And it probably covered like 50 or 60 players, I think. And it's grown since then quite a bit, to the point that it's a tome, and and it takes you through my process. And that's part of what it really is all about, is that I have a former operations manager background. And I wanted to be transparent about the process that I use, that were kind of a best practice process for evaluating performance. And it was really set on just kind of building on itself so that I could get better at watching football. And, over the past, 17 years, it's evolved into something that not only do fantasy players, especially dynasty players, use a lot. It's also something that I've been told by like Alex Brown, who's the recruiting head at SMU, the director of recruiting, and has worked at Rice and Houston before that it is one of the most purchased, that and Dane Brugler's guide are the two most purchased guide for cross-checking players by scouts that come by and visit what they do. So, I've had some fun stories and feedback with that. And that's my fantasy now, is like my fantasy stuff is hearing from people who are like, connected to major college football and pro game, who tell me about things like that and that those kinds of experiences. So it's become kind of like it's like fantasy. It's geared towards fantasy audiences. It has a nod of the tip of the hat to fantasy audiences, but I'd say it's football approved, and that's really that's where I try and look at it.
I was going to say, it kind of bridges that gap. A lot of us that play fantasy football are interested in real football, and that's why we play fantasy, right? And that's, we obviously watch the games, and it's just another way to enjoy the games. And I feel like what you do with the rookie scouting portfolio, from what I've seen of it and what I've read of it and things like that, it really bridges that gap between the two, I think, perfectly. It takes a very complex, very complicated situation in the NFL and all these different positions and all these different things and all these different ways to do it. And it kind of breaks it down for fantasy players in a way that's easy to digest and kind of, oh, okay, I can put my head on that and make sense of that. And that's actually why I like a lot of what you do, is because for a weird way. It kind of smartens me up while dumbing it down, right? It makes me feel like I'm learning something, but not like a painful process. It makes it so I can actually digest this information. So that's why, again, we're glad to have you. And if you want to just talk for 45 minutes or whatever you got, I mean, we can just listen. That's fine. We do have some obvious topics that I think we want to hit. And we kind of already hit it into a little bit, but it sounds like you were doing fantasy work before you did the scouting work. And that was kind of what led you into the RSP. But what was it about scouting, I guess, that made it feel like that was a gap in your knowledge? What was it about that drew you to scouting from fantasy, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, well, I started playing fantasy football probably in the early 90s and, office league, just like a lot of people. And it was one of those things where I just kind of had a knack for picking rookies. It was one of those things that, I was in Athens, Georgia with a bunch of guys and they were writing for fantasy sites like KFFL and doing some work with their newswire. And those guys were into it and they were good. And we, like everybody who gets in this industry, you read some of the magazines and you go, oh man, I could do that. We could do better than those guys. I mean, you just think it's always
hubris.
That way.
Yeah.
It's that hubris. Exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of those guys were doing that. And so I got into it. I think I wrote a guest article for Football Guys in 2000. And, David Dawes was like, would you like to write some more? And I was like, let me think about it. And then I said no, basically, and didn't do anything. And then like around 2003, I had this whole idea that I wanted to do like a mock draft site and have like this automated, it's not new now, but back then I wanted to have like the whole automated smart draft kind of thing that you can do that the sites do. And we were trying to build it and I needed to write content for it. And I had done some journalism and done some freelance writing. And I thought I'll write some stuff. And I got into that. But all my articles were on like this rookie, Brian Westbrook, this kid out of Villanova,
won me a title.
Started, looking at guys like that. Or Frank Gore's better than you think. He's not, he's a guy that actually could have a really great career, even though
no ACLs
twice,
okay.
All that kind of stuff. Or Larry Fitzgerald is the greatest ball catcher I've seen, outside of this guy, Brandon Lloyd, who I really like too, and it's those types of things would happen. And you'd have, I'd pick players and I'd find myself in drafts like everybody would laugh at me because I'd go, I'm going to skip Marshall Faulk in the first round with the Rams, and I'm going to pick Edgerrin James with the Colts, and people would laugh, and then they'd be paying me money, and it was like, so the rookie thing seemed to be my jam, even though like trying to scout, I'd find that, with the guy with kids and, been in my mid 30s and being in management, that I would turn on the tape and go, I'm going to watch Steven Jackson, and I'd get on the couch, have some popcorn, maybe have a beer, and 2.5 hours later, I'd wake up in the fourth quarter with like, with like a drool stained page and and something I can't read, and my cat sleeping on me, So it was like, at some point, I realized that I wanted to build on a strength and get better at it, and thought, for content, what could I do content-wise that would be helpful and help me get better at delivering fantasy content? And it was really about scouting talent. And because I had been in this operations management role and had then moved to this kind of quality management role where I was in charge of really the quality effort for a 10,000 employee company, where we were monitoring processes. And it was, I worked in a call center industry, okay? But still, I had to get certification that was based on best practices in manufacturing for evaluating how you do a process. And the whole best practice was built on, it gets better if you really follow the process and define things and do all that. And I'm reading, and I'm thinking about how I got into the draft because of Brian Westbrook, really, and thinking about all of these things and how it really didn't differ much from corporate America in terms of how people look at things. They give you the impressive view, in the tailored suit kind of high up view that's there to kind of like shock and awe you.
Right.
And then when you look at it, you go, they still put their pants on the same goofy way everybody else does, sometimes worse and sometimes more inept than you do, even though you're wearing Wranglers and they might be wearing, Armani. It's the same deal. So
I feel like I don't put my pants on right after you say that. Like, wait, they put it on.
I still put them on the same goofy way.
Exactly.
So whatever. So, but I mean, but it's one of those deals that down the line, I just thought this might be cool to get better at scouting. And I did it in the first year as an experiment. I had to like take my desktop to like a hotel. We had a friend who was in management, this local hotel in Athens, and she gave me like a friends and family rate for the week. And so I could get away from everybody and say, this is my vacation for the year. And I planned it for like 6 months and was like, I'm going to try and watch like 40 or 50 of these players because I'm woefully behind. I don't have time. And I'm either going to hate this or I'm going to love it at the end of it. And and as the story goes, I watched nearly 130 hours of tape that week. I logged it because I wanted to see how long it would take, and barely slept, and I loved it. And I was tired and I loved it. And I was like, I have the bug. I have the illness. And that was kind of how that came about.
Well, that's awesome. And I think
that's incredible.
That's one of those things that I guess is, if you have the bug, it, right? And you found it. And that's kind of, once you find it, it's hard to let that go, right? And that's sort of why you've been doing it this long. And I think one of the things I love about your process is you lay it out, kind of like what you just said. Like, the only way to get better is to the first step is admitting you have a problem, right? Like, let's just put it out there. We're addicted to this. We're on the Dynasty Addicts Network. So you're in a good spot
junkies.
here, man. We're junkies. We all get, exactly, give me my fix. But the catch of that is like you realize, okay, I'm doing it this way. Let me explain what I'm doing. Let me find where I can get better and then tweak it. And then I think that's what I like about it is that you're not perfect. You're never perfect. You're always getting better. You're always trying something new. You're always finding a gap that can be filled. And I think that's what I really respect about your work is that it's very humble, right? It doesn't come off as wearing an Armani suit. You're wearing Wranglers and you're like, I'm just doing this for me. And other people seem to like it. So I'll keep doing it. And that's something that I don't think everybody has. So I mean, that's huge.
Well, I appreciate that because it's a craft, and you are gonna, sometimes I was right and had no idea why. Like I remember the first year I had Mike Bell, who was a running back with the Denver Broncos, I think ranked 6th on my board, and he went undrafted. And and I remember thinking, well, it's my first year. What the hell do I know? So it's like, I'm trying to figure it out. And next thing you know, he's the starter as a rookie, and while he didn't have a long career, he showed some stuff that he could play in the league and that he could win over some established veterans for Mike Shanahan. So it was like, okay, so maybe there is something here. I don't know why I had that right. Let me try and look back and figure that out. And that's part of the thing. It's like and part of it is in anybody who's doing scouting, who's going to act like, whether it's scouting or analytical type of scouting, if they're on one extreme or the other, if they're going to sit there and throw stones at other people for their work, that they miss on stuff, then they're fools. Because it's really one of those things that everyone has to learn, and scouting is such a small part of it. So much of it is the guy have all the ability in the world, but is he willing to work? Is he willing to improve? Is he coachable? Is he? None of us do these interviews. Even the guys who are the big box draft folks, they're asking other people what those folks think about those players personally. And then have to count on those editorializations. So
it's a game of telephone operator, right? Where like the actual truth is buried somewhere in there, and it's hard to pull those nuggets out. Yep,
exactly. So for me, it's about the process. And I'd had lots of people come to me and go, "We should take your process to the NFL, and you should try and scale this and try and sell it." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to sell anything. No, I don't want to." And I'd usually have people go, "Do you know what scaling means?" And I'm sitting there going, yeah, it's like I used to scale operations for, all the time with this kind of stuff, but it was always fun to have salesmen try to come to me to do this. And it's like, no, dude, this is mine. Like, I want to actually, instead of managing people and having the problems that you have of like, that are just normal everyday stuff that people can't help themselves but be, I'd rather just count on myself and see what it is and make it a craft. So
it also adds a lot of variables, right? It adds a whole bunch of new wrinkles, and it's like, hey, I'm barely figuring my own out. You want me to add others in there? Like, come on, let me get this going on myself. I totally get that logic.
That's exactly right. So, I've gotten better with this as a result of that. And to have, and when someone like in 2011, I had someone, and I've described this person recently in an article, who's a type of person who has a degree, has a master's degree in stats, has a master's degree in biomechanics, played at the Division I level as a starter, scouted multiple teams, and then also worked in a capacity with most of the league, even if unbeknownst to most of the league, what capacities he worked with each of those teams separately with. And he wrote me in 2011 at a time that I was wondering if I was going to keep doing this. And it really came at the right time, because he said, listen, man, he goes, you still have things to learn as a scout. I'm not going to compare you to 20-year veterans out there, but your process is light years ahead of what the NFL is. And started showing me scouting reports and started sharing things with me to the point that it was like, he's like, your process is great. Like, you're going to get where you need to go because you're working on this stuff, and I want to validate to you a lot of the things that you're already seeing. Because what I described in this article, I called him a mentor, and he wrote me back. He goes, I'm not your mentor. He goes, I'm just showing you things you already knew and just showing you behind the curtain what was there. So it was kind of nice, but like, it was that kind of thing that helped me stay on the right track, because you learn that it is that, that what you're learning goes beyond the jargon or that whole curtain, of, because I thought you worked in the league. He goes, the stuff you would identify and go, this is BS, or the way this happens is so stupid, or, and I wouldn't say it that way in writing, but I would just say, these are opportunities that they had. These are things that don't make a lot of sense if you really look at it from a business perspective, or from, this level. Even though I've never been in the league, I've got to think this is kind of nutty. And he would write me and go, yeah, it absolutely is, and here's why. And then he would meet with like me and maybe Gene or a couple other people at Senior Bowl. It would be funny because he'd go, okay, can we meet somewhere outside of town? Because I don't want scouts, seeing where I'm at. And some people I know to this day who I have really good relationships with know him as like an assistant coach for one team, or a quality control specialist with another team, or something else, when he's actually a guy who had direct lines with GMs doing analytics and scouting. And Gene Bramwell would joke, he's the guy who would call bullshit to a scout, to an injury expert, and to an analytics person in the public sphere.
Well, on that note, I mean, like, do you pay attention more to the film, or do you pay attention to the data, right? Like, there's all this discussion, and we'll get into the 21 class or 22 class, I'm sorry, here in a minute. Yeah. But I mean, like, we got a listener question here. John McGlynn, I'm in a couple leagues with this guy. He's a good guy. He says here, as a former player, how do you watch film without knowing what the play is? You don't know what exactly everyone's supposed to do. QB reads, wide receiver routes, defensive mistakes. Like, how do you look at the film like that? And then how do you apply stats, and how do you look at the numbers for that? And then we can kind of go from there into the 22 class.
Yeah. Those are all great questions. And I'm glad John's on. He's someone I always see on Twitter. So, John, appreciate you listening. I would say this, it's, from that perspective, it's about watching a million times each play a lot of times, because really what you're looking for are, at first, when I would do this, I'd play this game of I Spy. And the reason the rookie scouting portfolio was so long is because I would write down everything I saw. And then over time, I started to learn that, okay, you start to realize what the plays are. There are only so many plays that are run. So eventually you start to learn, oh, this is power. This is a counter play. This is a draw play. This is, this is a smash concept, or these are, or even if you're not even looking at concepts the way you see a lot of the X and O's guys talk about, I can go, well, this looks familiar. This guy's running a corner route, and then they're running a short out beneath it or a little comeback. This is the type of thing I see. Or they're both running the same type of routes on each side of the field. This is a mirrored concept. So you start to like separate the dark from the dark and see the patterns. Yeah. And then part of it too is that you start, the biggest thing you learn, John, too, with this is that it's not so much about, it's really about identifying what the player did with all the potential things that he's supposed to do to put himself and his teammates in a position for a positive play. So it's not necessarily whether the play was run correct. Sometimes it's about the play running correctly or people doing or not doing their part. But a lot of it is the best scouting is learning how to play within the player playing within his control to control his destiny. So that way you start to realize, okay, if the guy isn't getting production, but he's doing everything he's supposed to do, and it's technically sound, it's conceptually sound, and you can see the athletic ability there, then that works out. Now, there are situations that you may not have answers to where, just like any scout, you'd wish that you could go to the coach and the player and go,
get a bug in their ear, right?
Yeah. How were you supposed to be coached on this play? Like,
what was the intent here? What were you thinking and not necessarily negative, but literally, what were you thinking when this all went down? Yeah, I'd love to hear some of that. Yeah,
because there's certain plays where you might not know why. Like, you might look at it and go, was the receiver supposed to break a certain way on this route and the quarterback was throwing it that way? Or was it the quarterback just inaccurate? And you may not know, but you find that those plays are like a handful.
Few and far between.
They aren't as big of a difference as you would think. So, in terms of the numbers, when you bring up the numbers, my whole, as Dwayne McFarland at PFF would say, when he contacted me and we started working together, he just laughed because he said, everyone thinks like you're just this film only guy. And he goes, you're more analytics than most of the analytics people, but they don't realize you're doing it with film. Right. Because your whole process is about taking a subjective thing and giving a definitive, a defined criteria with it, and then giving weighted numbers to it, and then tracking all of it and putting it in databases or in spreadsheets now, and putting it away where you can look it up. So when someone back in the day, and I don't want to make them look bad because they're terrific at what they do, but they once brought up, I said something about how most running backs, if they can't win a direct collision with at least a safety, if not a linebacker, far and away, most of them do not perform well in the league as a starter long term. And somebody said, well, do you have the data for that? And I said, as a matter of fact, I do.
Actually,
and I like in 20 minutes, I counted up, like, I've looked at 800. I don't remember what the number, but I'm going to guess. I think I've looked at 750 running backs at this point. And here are two that I have listed who failed that criteria point that I mentioned, and who actually have had starter-worthy numbers for one season in the league. One of them was Marlon Mack, and that was it. I said they've been to me the exception proves the rule. And I remember somebody like who was an analytics person who likes throwing stones said something along those lines, and the guy said, "Listen, he has the data. He shut me up. That's what I wanted to know. And he has the data, and the data's all there, and it makes sense, So
see, that's another thing. You're bridging this gap between film and analytics too, Matt. You're just bringing groups together.
I mean, I'm just gonna go back to our data versus film argument over the summer, and I mean, I was right. The definitive answer is right here. It's both.
It's both.
It's both.
Yep. It's absolutely
it's both.
I look at I've got stuff right now that I'm looking at with, this class especially, and we'll get into it obviously soon. But I look at, there's a lot with this class where there's very little separating a lot of these players. And for me right now on film, like there's a lot of things I'm looking at. And part of it too is you judging speed, acceleration, and short area quickness. There's things you can see that give you a a window into that, but you still need the workouts to help you to an extent. They can help contextualize it a little bit more. Now, the thing is, where it gets dangerous is like players like Dalvin Cook, where Dalvin Cook was infamously a guy who can't cut. Like, he can't cut and he can't jump. And so everyone, the people who were pure analytics were like, oh, this guy's not as good as you would think. And then the film guys were right, maybe for the wrong reason, because if they were all film, they were like, well, this stuff looks good. Underwear Olympics. He looks good on tape. He's productive. And the real answer was that the way he runs is an anomaly. So what stylistically he does at a high level doesn't fit what the workouts at the combine trying to model. And this is what a lot of
a whole other thing. Yep.
And that's what a lot of position coaches will tell you, who are experts, who work with, like Sean Miska, who is a coach who's worked with Everson Griffin and a number of pass rushers. He'll be like, there's going to be a day, because if agents really wanted to be like, let's fix the combine, let's not do the boycott about having your trainers there. Let's focus on getting workouts that actually mimic what the players do. And so rather than having them taught to the test. But Dalvin Cook was a good example of a guy who has what Sean Miska termed, and I've made a little more popular in the fantasy space, curvy linear movement, which is ability to bend around an obstacle at a high speed. And that's what Dalvin Cook did great, because he can't make hard cuts, but he can bend around you, like one of those street cycles. So he doesn't need to. So that 3-cone drill is useless. So if he had a slow 3-cone drill or a slow short slow shuttle and a short vertical leap, who cares? Throw it out, because he's basically making fools out of guys who did have those qualities on defense. So that's part of why you got to do both together. And it is important, and it's one of those things that sometimes you can look at a guy and love certain aspects of their games, and then you look at this number and you go, that's important to me. Like I that helps contextualize where he wins and where he won't.
Well, so on that note, let's get into the QBs, right? Let's talk about some of these guys. So who is your favorite? And I know that's kind of a loaded question and it's vague on purpose, but like, who would you say is your favorite QB that you've scouted in this class?
Well, it's between two guys right now. And the guy, I just had Matt Corral as a subject of our film room, and I like him. He's one of my favorites, but I think my favorite might be Carson Strong. Because the more I watch him, the more I think if the knee's healthy, he could be the top quarterback in this class. But part of it is that he's very good in the pocket and he processes things fast. So to me, the quarterback position really comes down to, and this is a conversation I had with a former scout who is called Honest NFL on Twitter, who's a good follow. And we talked about the fact that it doesn't matter, once you have the baselines of arm strength, speed, ability to throw the ball with accuracy, and it doesn't matter whether you can read the field, at a level on a whiteboard in a classroom and be able to say, it doesn't matter whether you can go to your fifth read or not, What matters is when things go awry, or when things are happening at high pressure situations, when the stage is set where it's like it's the fourth quarter and you're down by 4 and you have to score and it's 2nd and 11, do you see where the safeties align and put everything together and go, this is a shot play I've got to make? Or are you going to check it down?
So you're saying Carson Strong is one of those he makes the play kind of guy, right? Like he's got that intangible, that thing you really can't put a data point to, right? That's kind of what you're saying almost.
I'm saying he makes I would say he makes the right decisions. And there's like 4 or 5 data points, but you got to put them together to be able to, that intangible to me, I call it the it factor, is integrated technique. So he's integrated certain decision makings with leverage. He's integrated certain decision makings with accuracy. and he's understood when and where and how to throw that ball, as well as and if it involves also avoiding people, how to efficiently do all of that. And so, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, so would that be like your best trait? Like, is that the one you look for the most in quarterback? Is that not necessarily all of those things, but decision making, right?
And and all those things fall on a lot of those things fall under that. Yes, decision making by far, the speed in which you process information and come up with solutions, and not only find the solution, but being in a position to throw the ball. Because there's a lot of guys who, like Kenny Pickett's a good example. He does a great job separately being able to avoid pressure and then throw the ball. But can he be in a position where he has to make a quick evasive maneuver and get rid of the ball and be in position to take advantage of what he sees? And some guys don't do that well, even though he's great at finding his fifth read. But when an unblocked defender comes his way 4 steps away, and he's like freaks out, and now instead of like Carson Strong will bait that defender, mainly because he doesn't have a choice because he can't move. But like he moves okay, but like he's not elusive like Kenny Pickett. Right. He makes the wow plays that everyone's going to see on ESPN. But like he's a guy that will bait till one step, make the quick move. Tom Brady does that very well. So do some of the most mobile guys, and then be in a position to get the ball out like that. Whereas Kenny Pickett, he might have to, when he feels that pressure that's unblocked and he's not expecting it, not only does he not just make that little move, it's more like he ducks his head, the ball goes like way out here, his body's in a position where it takes him longer to get to reset to throw than it takes Carson Wentz. So if you're going to talk about mobility, you might say Carson Wentz in an odd way is the most mobile quarterback in this class, even though he's physically the most immobile.
Interesting.
I wanted to. It's funny you mentioned that because I did want to just real quick ask you, because he's basically the one of the 5 guys that everybody's talking about from that doesn't really run the ball. He's not, he doesn't have that kind of mobility. Do you worry about his fantasy upside? I know you like him most from maybe an NFL perspective, but he's almost got to be like an elite passer to overcome the fact that he's basically a 0 as a runner.
He is. And so that means, yes, that none of these quarterbacks in this class to me have elite upside. I just don't. I don't really. I think if any of these quarterbacks becomes a low tier quarterback 1, they have exceeded expectations. Okay. I think I think there's a couple that might, if they exceed expectation, have a chance to exceed them greatly. Like,
who would that be?
I think Matt Corral, because of the mobility and because of the ability to do some of the things that Carson Strong can. I think Kenny Pickett in a great offense can give you some of those Kirk Cousins type of games, years where he's close to top 5. And I don't see it, but if Malik Willis can follow the route, everyone wants to say he's Josh Allen, or it could be Josh Allen. But there's such a confluence of factors that are going to have to happen.
Trey Lance of Josh Allen.
Yeah, he's amazing as a runner, but I've been watching some Malik Willis. I'm a novice, Matt, but I do try and watch these guys, and he's got so much to work on in the passing game.
The eyeball test succeeds on that for sure. Like, you just look at it and go, wow, So, and it is. I mean, there's something there, but I think this is more marketing of the draft of like the high-end athlete of what he could be, and he could exceed. I mean, but it's Josh Allen was the exception in that regard. So there's that, and there's a couple other guys who are intriguing. Bailey Zappi's interesting. Like I like a lot of what I saw about him, but again, he's going to have to be in an offense like Drew Brees and have to show some things that I think Drew Brees showed more of than he did for that to happen. And then there's another guy that I'm just going to wait because I haven't seen him yet. But he's on my list for this weekend, and I keep I keep hearing from people I trust, like Mark Schofield and Russell Landy. And Russell Landy didn't mention this guy by name, but I know he's talking about this guy. And Russ Landy is the head of U.S. scouting at the Montreal Alouettes right now, former NFL scout. He's been on. He and I have done shows together. We'll probably.
He's incredible. Yeah.
But Russ, I do a little unofficial, stuff with him, and so not much, but like just a little bit. And but he mentioned a quarterback that he likes that no one's talking about, and I have a feeling this is the guy. So
so you're not talking about.
We'll listen to next week's podcast.
Yeah,
okay,
okay, that's fine. That's fine. Well, as I said, it's a great tease. Great tease on that.
Yeah.
The only other thing I really want to talk about with quarterbacks, and obviously we can go on about this for 3 hours, so we got to kind of keep it moving here, but I do want to see, like you mentioned it a little bit, I guess, is how would you compare these quarterbacks against last year's class? Obviously, Lawrence is still that kind of, coming in, he was that next Andrew Luck. We've seen Fields and Jones, I think, do pretty well and have a good future. But would you put Lance above them too? I mean, like, where are these quarterbacks in your comparison?
I think they're more in the range of where I had Davis Mills, who I had higher than most. I had him higher than Zach Wilson. So I would say there's maybe 3 to 5 guys at the end of the day who might be above Zach Wilson, who was my 6th quarterback. And if not, then they're in that range, which is kind of like where I had Zach Wilson, Baker Mayfield, guys who, if you put a lot behind that team,
if they land in the right spot, if they get the right head coach with the right play caller, with the, all those things go right. Yeah.
They're not going to elevate what's around them. They need what's around them to elevate them.
Yeah. And the 2 guys who have the best chance are probably Matt Corral. Matt Corral's probably the best chance of that, but even then, conceptually, Carson Strong's better right now. But like you guys said, he's going to have, as a fantasy guy, I think he's going to have to be like Phillip Rivers. In order, and that's who his aspirational comp to me is Phillip Rivers.
That's a good comp. I mean, in the early Phillip Rivers is a good comp. I mean, like, we don't want to get into the turnover king at the end of his career, Phillip Rivers. That's okay. That's a 12 years, whatever later. That's fine.
Does he remind you of Randy Quaid by any chance? Like, there's something about him that reminds me.
Yes.
Like, there's
not in a good
look
way
on his face. Yeah, it's like, like you're waiting for him to talk about the aliens and what they do to him, Yeah.
I've told my Phillip Rivers story on this podcast before, being in an elevator with him. So reach out to me if you want to hear that. But on running backs, I want to ask you something kind of specific. We always talk about, the running backs will get on the field if they can protect the quarterback, because otherwise, they're not going to leave the quarterbacks out there with rookie running backs and things like that. Okay, yeah, we get it. Pass protection is that something that translates to the NFL? Is that something that you can watch in college and you can go, okay, with college offenses, these guys, a lot of them don't pass protect a lot. So you don't really get a chance to see that, right? But when you do you find that that's something that translates? Are there guys that you just know that it's like, this guy really gets it, he'll probably be able to do that, whether he's talented enough to get on the team for other reasons, maybe he doesn't even get the chance to play, but if he does, or even some of the higher end backs, if they can do it, do you find that does translate and that it's meaningful?
Yeah, and I think you see it far more often than people let on. It just depends on how you're watching. If you're watching like cut-ups on YouTube, then you probably don't see it as often.
Right.
But if you're actually watching the games, the full games, or watching, something else like coaches tape, things like that, you're going to see it, and you're going to see how they handle assignments. You're going to get to see, a lot. There's a lot of ways people look at blocking. And I would say this: some people go, listen, man, if they just give the effort, then I feel good about them being able to do it. That's one way of looking at it. Of course, I'm a little more detailed than that. So I like to, I look at cut blocking. I look at, blocks against, how they position themselves, entering the crease, how they use a punch, breaking down what cut blocks look like and all the components. So you can see and then who they're blocking. Are they blocking defensive ends, and defensive tackles, or are they blocking linebackers, or are they blocking cornerbacks?
Safeties, yeah.
Right. And so those things help you too. And when you start to break all that down, you do begin to see a guy like you go, oh, AJ Dillon can block. Like this guy could even handle like a legit SEC defensive end on occasions. He's not. You're not going to ask him to like be on an island.
He's a big boy himself. So.
Yeah, you're not going to put him up against. You're not going to put him up against Chandler Jones and say, "Have at it, baby." You got 50 reps with him today. But like on the backside, maybe on the front side of a play where the quarterback is like, "Okay, I know that I've got Aaron Rodgers. Like I've got AJ Dillon on Chandler Jones right now. I know that I better get this ball away quickly, and he'll be able to hold it for that. But if my first read isn't open, I better get away, and that's but that's useful because there's other times where you might go, I'm trying to think of somebody and I can't right off the bat who's especially bad, but if he's like, I've got Matt Waldman on the edge, doing this, he's going to be like, I'm rolling left as soon as my drop begins,
Right.
that's a big difference. So, or I'm audibling to another play. I got to bring a tight end over here.
Get out of there.
Because he's going to have to double team with this tight end at least, or something like that.
Right. Have you watched Kenneth Walker at all?
Absolutely. I'm done watching him.
Okay. So I'm a Michigan fan, and I knew going into the game, you just got to stop Kenneth Walker. That's all you got to do. I think the defense knew it. I think they still couldn't do it. It was incredible. It was amazing. He just ran over him, and I'm like looking at you. He looks bigger than he is. He's really not that big. So it was very impressive to me, honestly. And so that's great. But, can he catch? Will he be a 3-down back? Do any of those things? Do you think that that's even a possibility for him? Can you even tell, since they didn't throw the ball to him very much?
That's always a fun question too, is like with Melvin Gordon, Leonard Fournette, and a number of other players, I found Jonathan Taylor, quality trumps quantity most of the time. Because if you're breaking it, if you're breaking it down to the techniques they use, how they whether they can track the ball correctly, they may not be great route runners, and that becomes the question. Because if you want to say who's the next Brian Westbrook or the next Austin Eckler or James White, then you're like, I don't have enough reps to show you because all they're running are screen passes and wide routes.
Sure.
And then at that point, you're like,
what are you evaluating? Yeah.
It's a major projection. But if you can but for catching the ball, there's oftentimes I can look at some things, and there's enough put the pen down moments, as Mark Schofield would say, where you look and you go, oh, I just watched Kenneth Walker run a wide route and the ball's over the shoulder and he extended for that, or he extended low and away on the move and been able to catch a ball off his shoe tops without having to leave his feet. That's enough for me to go, the guy can catch,
he can do it.
Track. Yeah. It's just about running a route. So yeah, I'm interested in the size because I looked at him too and I thought they've listed him at 220. That seems awfully generous, but maybe he is that heavy in the legs, and maybe he adds another 5 or 10 pounds of upper body weight. And now he's like 227, and you're like, whoa, or the jersey number, people laugh about this, and I always feel ridiculous saying it too, but it's true. Like you can look at a jersey number and you see like number 1, and you go, that guy looks kind of small, and then he's in the NFL and he shows up wearing 24, and you're like, oh. Yeah, suddenly that looks right,
Yeah,
so,
88. You're like, oh, so he's true. Big, man. 80,
Yeah.
Yep. Very true. Well, and I think just to kind of wrap up with the RBs, on this one, we kind of asked this before, but again, I think it's the same idea. What would you say is your favorite running back in this class? Do you have a guy that you're kind of high on that maybe the crowd is missing, or that someone's not really talking enough about that you really seem to like out of this group?
Oh yeah, there's always a few. Let me look real quick here because I know who I'd like to mention a lot, but I've talked about Keante Ingram a fair bit. So I'm, he's
my guy.
He's a guy that I think a lot of people probably already know, and he's going to be known as a major sleeper. I'm going to talk about somebody else who may not ever become much, but he's going to probably grade out high for me, depending on the combine. That might alter it a little bit. Is Fresno State running back Ronnie Rivers.
Ooh.
Ronnie Rivers,
Break
who
that
is a 5'9", 195-pound kind of scat back who catches the ball really well, runs good routes, might have some of that James White in him.
Ooh.
And if he really, and maybe, you know, there's that, you know, I look at him on Sundays and I go, there's a little Dion Lewis. He's quick enough. Maybe he's able to have that ability to make people miss, and he runs well between the tackles. He's got that contact balance. And then I start, you know, you start having those, you know, fever dreams of Austin Eckler and go, can he be Austin Eckler? I don't think he's there, but I think he's a lot better than people think. So he's a guy that, you know, I think might be able to, you know, work his way into maybe a supporting role, and with the right team, maybe start to prove himself to being a little more if an opportunity comes with injury. So he's a guy I'm keeping an eye on. We'll see if that stays that way, you know, at the end of this month. And another guy I'll mention, just who's the opposite end of that, but catches the ball really well, is 6'1", 235-pound running back Christopher Brooks out of Cal. Who was known as Christopher Brown before he changed his name. He's strong, has underrated burst. I mean, this guy runs through people. He will make holes. And he's a guy that's fairly nifty with his footwork, has good vision. There's a little bit of, like, you know, maybe there's a little CJ Anderson going on there. They came from the same school. I like CJ Anderson at Cal too. He was a guy I kept saying, here's a UDFA to keep an eye on. And Brooks is kind of that guy to me that I think could be that next potential UDFA that you go, where did he come from like 3 years from now? You know,
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. Well, I
was just going to say, before we move on to wide receivers, I just wanted to throw out there, because John McGlynn asked about him in the chat, what Matt thinks of Dameon Pierce.
I think he, you know I said it in an article. I think he has a role. He has a role in the NFL. I think Florida seems lately, I don't like to logo scout, but it seems like lately Florida has guys like Michael Pirine that could have a career in the NFL over a period of time, but may never be like a high-end fantasy type of guy. And I think Pierce has a better chance than Pirine ever did. But Pierce is a guy who, I like his shiftiness. He can really cut. Very good receiver. Like, this is a guy who makes contested plays. He runs hard, finishes well. He has a little more burst than you would expect and good vision. I don't know if he's going to have the acceleration that you're looking for to ever be anything more than like a mid-range contributor for a team, not necessarily even a fantasy team. Like, maybe in a good year with injuries, he could give you RB3, RB2 numbers, but I don't think he's a guy that you're going to be going, you know, big name. To me, I think he got that Senior Bowl bump in the same way that Felton did. And when you watch Felton's tape, you're like, this guy would probably be better off as a wide receiver, because as his decision making and understanding of scheme are really lacking. Whereas with Pierce, his scheme and technical and conceptual skills are very good, but I wonder if he has an athletic ceiling. We're about to find out, I'm sure.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there's a lot of good names for us to go do some deep diving on. I appreciate that, man. Obviously, you don't want to give it all away. You got this, 1,000+ page thing. If people want more info, they can go find that, right? That's where you do all of this stuff. But yeah, let's get into the wide receivers before we let you go. I know we really appreciate your time. Sure. Wide receivers, I feel like, are a little bit of a different breed this year. It's kind of, there's some discussion at the top. Is it, Garrett Wilson or is it Treylon Burks, or is it Chris Olave? Like, there's some kind of talent at the top. But I mean, is Treylon Burks the clear cut 101 in Dynasty? Like, is that your guy overall, or is there somebody else maybe that you think from the wide receiver group that should be better than him, or be, for fantasy especially, but even in the NFL, like, is a better talent?
Burks is in that tier. He's in the top tier. And I would say with receivers more than anything, tiers are the best way to go because there's such a wide range of usage. Because if you took Deebo Samuel and said, listen, man, we're going to put you on the Atlanta Falcons and have you play Julio Jones's role.
Right.
It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't. He would probably be an 800 or 900 yard receiver and he'd be good and people would be arguing about just how good he really is. And some would say he sucked when, where you put him in San Francisco and have him that multi-purpose role. And suddenly he's one of the best receivers in the league production wise. Well, Treylon Burks is that type of player. And I'm still kind of like, I'm leaning more Deebo than Cordero, but there are some Corderoisms that are not positive about him, but he's kind of a mix between Deebo Samuel and Cordero Patterson in terms of how you can use him. And people had some, he as Matt, can't remember his name, former safety who was on NFL Matchup with Greg Cosell, who's a fantastic analyst at ESPN. He was talking about Burks today. I saw a tweet and he said Matt Bowen. That's right. Yeah, Matt Bowen's awesome. And Matt said that he thinks Treylon Burks has the traits to defeat press coverage. And to me, what that means is he doesn't do it yet. Of course he has the traits, but there's times that he really doesn't have a plan right now. So it's not an immediate thing for him. And Deebo didn't have a plan against press. He was awful against press at SC. And he's getting better at it, but that's not his jam either. And that's why he's where he's at in terms of the way he's being used. You don't need that all the time. But so Burks is in the tier, but so are probably 4 or 5 other players who are in that tier. And I would say one of the players in this tier that should be getting a lot more love, but injuries kind of derailed that love after an initial coming out party was Justin Ross.
I knew you were going to say that.
I think
that's
Justin
Russ's guy.
I think big Clemson wide receiver. Yeah.
I think Justin Ross could easily be the best receiver in this class. Now, the thing is again, it's about fit with all these guys. And when I'm studying guys, if I'm the San Francisco 49ers, I might go, Treylon Burks is by far the best guy in this class. Or if I'm trying to be trendy on social media and say, Deebo Samuel is the guy everyone's hot for, so let me find the Deebo Samuel guy and talk about him. And I'm not saying people are consciously doing this just to get likes, but I think it's a way that people are strategic about going, who's going to be a hot guy to talk about? And certainly Deebo Patterson or Treylon Burks, that's my kind of joke name for him, is going to be that guy everyone wants to talk about. But again, if a team says they're going to do this, or we got to remember, and you're going to see this all the time. You see this all the time with the draft. People are going to go, well, they wouldn't have drafted him if they weren't going to use him this way.
Right.
Well, not if the coach and the owner and GM are not aligned, and the owner and GM going, well, the car dealer who I'm sitting in the sauna with, who's making fun of me every week and giving me stuff that Colin Cowherd says and telling me how all this is react, and I'm going to react by going, forget what all the scouts wanted. The scouts wanted Justin Ross because our offense, he'd fit seamlessly in that offense. But our owner's like, screw that, and says, I make the calls. I don't care about the 3 years of scouting you did.
I want good PR. I
want the guy ESPN's touting as the top guy. Well, and I'm going to get me some Burks. And now he doesn't fit. And that happens. That happens. I'll just get the one that's most infamous to me was, imagine how the careers of Vince Young and Jay Cutler might have been different. Oof. If Mike Heimerdinger or whoever, if the scouts got who they wanted was Jay Cutler, and Jay Cutler basically was in a give up mode after his Pro Bowl season with the Broncos because they traded him to the Bears, and the Bears became a turnstile, and he just became, he became basically
Smoking Jay.
Smoking Jay. Might as well have been like Constantine. I kind of joke that he was kind of like the Constantine of quarterbacks, but like. That's the thing is that, Ross could be that good. Drake London could be that good. You know,
I
a lot
like
of people
Drake.
don't like the lack of speed, but you know, I remember Michael Thomas lacked speed. And
You can
people
be
worried
quick and
about
not
him.
fast, right?
You
There's
can-
those differences too. Yep.
That's all important. Cooper Cup, you know, all those guys. You know, it's about where you fit. And Drake London can catch. He can take a licking and keep on ticking. And he's a guy who runs, you know, routes and gets separation, you know, in the ways that he needs to. David Bell's another one I love.
Yeah.
David
I
Bell
like
might
him.
be. I think David Bell's one of my favorites. Like he's probably, you know, he's a fun one. And a guy I'll mention that I don't hear many people talk about, but he's kind of a hoss, is Eric Ezukanma, the Texas Tech receiver, 6'3", 220, and plays like it. You know, he's a little on the raw side, but you know, there's a lot of fun receivers in this class. It's another good receiving class. It's not
a
like
good
last
deep
year.
class.
Yeah, it's
With
not
the-
like
Well, I was just going to ask with Ross, do you worry about the draft capital at all because of the injuries and all that?
I would worry about it more if the medicals don't clear up and he drops to like the 5th or 6th round, then yes, I would worry about the draft capital. If he's like a 3rd round pick, no. I think if he drops as far as the 3rd, and what was brought up today, I think John Martin, who's a Twitter analyst, who's on Twitter a lot, kind of emailed me something about how I guess Lance Zierlein had a conversation with Debo about John Ross. And what a lot of people didn't know is that John Ross played with a 5th metatarsal injury since the week 1 and was getting shot up with Toradol pretty much weekly and played through it. And this is a type of injury that nobody usually plays through, and especially a receiver. And he just gritted through it. And I've watched a ton of his 2022 tape, and he didn't score much different than he did pre-injuries.
Really?
Yeah, I was.
That's good news.
Yeah, it was like Nick Chubb after the knee injury. Everybody was like, oh, you know, and I'm like, I don't see a difference. And I watched
it's also a case of that classic double counting, right? Where you lower him down because he's injured, and then he comes back from injury, and people go, oh, well, he was injured, so we should lower him. Like, we already did that. You know what I mean? Like, we've already kind of knocked him a little. Let's put him back where he should be if he can get back in. So that's what you're saying. Like, you're seeing it on the field. You're seeing the same scores. That says everything. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks fine. I mean, I didn't see it. The worst thing about him was his quarterback. You know, I mean, and I don't, you know, and that's not a huge knock on the quarterback. It's just he didn't have Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was a number 1 overall pick.
That's a big difference. Yeah.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. You can't let that go. Yeah. I think the only other, I guess, I mean, we have a bunch of questions we could ask.
Go for it. Keep asking. We're good.
We talked about this with QBs. We didn't get into it as much depth with the running back, but I am still curious. Like, what are the 1 or 2 traits that you do like really pay attention to for like sleeper wide receivers? Like in a dynasty draft, when you're in the 2nd and 3rd round, what kind of traits should we be pulling out and like focusing on for those deeper wide receiver options?
Well, for one with receivers is we'll start with catching the ball. I want to see receivers who, when they bring their hands up to catch the ball, their hands are together, whether it's low or high. But what I don't want to see is this. And I see a lot of this with even good players. And when you do this number and you're like you're a 4-year-old learning how to catch the ball bounces off your forehead when it goes through your hands like this, or hits your hands and goes flying. And you see guys like that. So you want to see guys who, when they can bring their hands up, they bring them up together and they have very good technique. So that's one thing.
I just got to say, I played wide receiver. That's the position I know best. That's the position I seem to have the most success with in Dynasty too. But that is something I literally learned the first week of being a wide receiver. So I have no idea how you get to be a college receiver and you catch like that. It just literally makes no sense to me. I mean, I learned thumbs, below the waist pinkies, above the waist thumbs, and then we caught tennis balls all day with fingertips. You catch with your fingertips. I mean, I learned that week 1, and I've known it ever since. It just makes no sense to me.
Like Deontay Johnson going back to those basics this year to figure out how to stop dropping the ball. you
Right.
know, and he only had one drop through like the first like 10 or 12 weeks because of that. But here's the thing. A lot of receivers don't get taught. So what happens is they're ungodly fast, they're ungodly strong,
Just
they're
talent.
ungodly quick.
Just talent.
And
Yeah.
the guy in the SEC goes, well, this guy's going to make me money because we just throw the ball up and he's going to beat 95% of the people we got until we play LSU
If he drops when he drops
or
one,
Georgia, you know, we're going to be okay. And then we'll find
Someone else
we'll
will
get
teach him how to catch. Yeah,
exactly. Or we'll get the
Yeah.
super technical guy as well. So
Wild.
if that guy isn't working, we got the super technical guy too. But that's one thing. I would say also, I want to see guys being able to drop their weight and come to a quick stop on hard breaks. That's something I want. That expands the route options that they can run. You know, so that's part of it. I also want to see a guy, and then the third. So I've given you a route thing. I've given you a hands thing, and then the third one would be releases, where I want to see, you know, someone use both a combination of their footwork to set up a defender and then counter with their hands. And I want it to be different moves. I don't want it to be the same two moves because if they're that predictable, they're going to get their ass shut down pretty much.
That's a good point.
Pretty quick.
Versatility too, right? Being able to do different things in different situations and like being able to use different tools in different ways. That's always good to see. Yep.
Yeah. Good example of that is the contrast to Deebo Samuel's Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp had a great hands and feet game with releases and also after the catch. I mean, his stiff arm was fantastic all the time. You see him against Pac-10 guys and you're going, I don't know why anybody isn't talking about him. But he was a guy that at the Senior Bowl, when, they did wide receiver workouts were always the most fun to watch to me because they gave the most information that you could look at in certain ways if you understood the drills. And one of the drills that they like to do a lot is they would get cones and they would have a narrow width between cones, like maybe a 5-yard window at most. And they'd put a receiver one-on-one with a cornerback. And the good teams, the teams that ran a good practice would do this. And they would say, okay, you can't go outside these cones. You got to separate quickly from the defensive back and go outside and can't get outside these cones. And the 3 years that I've seen that happen, pretty much every receiver failed on miserably at it. Deebo Samuel was like mowing over the cones. He was like well outside on the median, he was like at the rest stop, like out in the weeds, like basically, basically relieving himself at the end of this, like taking a break.
Driver's license after that.
Exactly. It was, but there were a lot of guys like that. And then he got a little better. But the only guy I saw who like beat everyone every time and with a different move or set of moves every time was Cooper Kupp. That like watching him was like, it was like watching someone. It was like watching David Blaine do magic tricks and like do different ones all the time. And you're like, going, these are the same old card tricks, but he's putting a new spin on them. That was Cooper Kupp. It was like, he had different variations. It was like, oh, I could do this all day, and I'd never seen a receiver do that before.
Is there anyone in the 22 class that kind of stands out to you in those kind of traits? Like that's someone that's not quite in that top tier, but like someone in those later rounds or even like the Justin Ross type, somebody you think that might be dropping a little bit that has those talents that maybe isn't getting enough recognition? Anything you can give us on the depth there?
I really like Braylon Sanders. I don't know if he's high up there or
fast
not.
Too.
Yeah, he is fast. Braylon Sanders is a guy that I'd keep an eye on. I think Jalen Naylor out of Michigan State's kind of interesting. I don't know if he's fast enough, but he's kind of interesting on that regard. And a guy that I'll give you two more guys. Tyquan Thornton, I think, is fast and has something to him that, I think he can develop, but he may not be in that thing. Or actually three. I'm going to give you three. Kwame Lassiter. Lassiter out of Kansas. He can win press. He has to get his pads down a little bit more, but he has moves. And I watched him against Texas and was like, I thought I was watching Stephon Diggs a little bit at times.
Ooh,
like in terms of release game, not everything else, but in terms of
Yep.
release game. And then a guy I just like, who I'm just waiting to see how he runs. I don't think he's been invited to the combine, but I want to see his pro day, is Johnny Johnson III out of Oregon. Johnny Johnson III is 6 feet, 198, and he makes those catches that you're just like, how did you do that? You know, how'd you do that type of catches? And he played with Herbert, and he made some catches that I go, these are some of the best catches I'm seeing in college football. And nobody talks about this guy. And he's a physical blocker. And he's, you know, if he has enough of the baseline athletic ability, he could be fun.
Well, so now, you're talking about guys in like, you know, third, fourth, fifth rounds of dynasty rookie drafts. So that's exactly what we're looking for, is some of those, you know, later flyers, those later little nuggets that we can kind of, in the dynasty community, that's people that we should take definitely a closer look at. And I think too, as we kind of wrap this up, even there is something to be said about players that are, you know, who we're attracted to now or who we're looking at now. But once we have landing spots and draft capital and all these other things come into play, the picture becomes a lot clearer. It becomes a lot more fun to kind of then say, all right, well, now we know so-and-so is Johnny Johnson is playing with Kyler Murray. How does that affect it? Right. Like, it gives you all of these different, options to kind of read out and kind of see where the route tree is going to go, and see what the coaching tree is like. Okay, what do they usually run? And it kind of adds a whole bunch more fun to this. So it's interesting to talk about it before the draft, because it's almost like we're unbiased now. We don't have any of those other things. We can just learn about the players. And then once we know the situation, we can add that into our mix. So that's also what I love about what you do at the RSP, is kind of breaks it down from a player standpoint, from a trait standpoint. It numerically puts a value to a subjective thing, you know, and that's just, not everybody does that, and not everybody, and everybody that does it doesn't do it well. So that's why we're really big fans of what you do over there at the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. I know, Scott, one thing before we let you go, Scott definitely had something he wanted to ask you. Scott, are you ready for this question of the one and only Matt Waldman?
This is the hard hitter, Matt, to send you off with. But one thing I want to just tell the listeners real quick before that is, you know, imagine that your neighbor is an NFL scout and he's never home, but occasionally when he is, you get to have a beer with him. You talk some shit. He tells you about all these players and stuff. That's cool, whatever. But imagine that you could hire your very own scout, and he covers all the players, all of them, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, every single skill position player. And he's going to give you a full report on those players. And it's only going to cost you $21.95. So mattwaldman.com, buy the RSP. I don't even care if you read it. Honestly, I hope you don't, because I don't want you to have the edge. Because it's been great. Wait a minute,
what are we doing here?
But I do want you to support Matt. So mattwaldman.com, buy that. And on top of that, you now started last year, I believe. You started with the Dynasty, the second level almost to that to the RSP. And that's going to take Dynasty steps a little bit further there. And so that's another one that I don't want people to know about. But hey, go buy it, and then forget how to download it. And but
well, I appreciate that for sure.
Please do that. Please do that. Okay, my final hard-hitting question, and since before the show you told us you've recently changed your diet, but you and Mark Schofield always talk about what you guys enjoy cooking. So I need to know your latest meal that you've been cooking a lot during this prep season.
Oh boy. Well, I've gone to a plant-based diet. Part of it is and it's not because of for ethical reasons or anything like that. I used to be on a plant-based diet when I was younger and didn't have any type of issues whatsoever. So I'm trying to avoid any type of issues now that I'm 52 years old. So and sitting for 12, 16, 18, 20 hours.
It's brutal what it does to the body.
Yeah. So I'm trying to fix that so that I can continue doing this for a while. And so, I'd say I've made a really nice, what you would call a cauliflower steak, which my wife, who is an inveterate meat eater, who could probably eat steak every day and be happy.
Same way.
Though she's in steak jail right now. because she has gone to the doctor, and the doctor was like, I think and normally she's in, she's usually in great health, and she has been, but they were kind of like, yeah, maybe you want to lay off this for a little
Maybe
bit.
a couple
So I put her in meat jail, and she's been
I like that.
she's 6 weeks in, and it's going well, but the cauliflower steak's a favorite with a chimichurri sauce or with a balsamic glaze, because it gives you that meatiness texture, and it gets that roast. You roast it after you pan sear it, so it's soft. The pan sear kind of gives you that sear type of taste, but then you soften it up in the oven.
Consistency, that texture,
yeah. So that one's a good one. I'm trying to think of what else I'm using. Certain stir fries I do with that are like a sweet potato, kind of like a baked sweet potato.
Okay.
Chunks with the stir fry with kind of like a garlic chili type of sauce. That's gone over pretty well.
That could work. That I could do.
Yeah.
That I could do.
And then I would say a thing that's kind of a surprise for a lot of people is I use plant-based pastas like bean paste, bean pastas, and they're pretty good. I mean, unless you're someone who's like diehard, I need to have like my wheat or my wheat pasta type of thing, and it can't be any different. They're a little gummier than other stuff, but unless you're like that specific, they're good. And so I use those, and I'll make a cashew cream that makes an Alfredo with a cashew cream.
Okay.
That is very good with some like king mushrooms that gives it a nice meatiness, and and some things like either broccoli or kale that you can saute up. I don't know. My wife likes everything I cook. The biggest problem is that usually she gets away with eating meat because I'm so busy that I'm not making time to cook. But now that she's in meat jail, I'm the one punished because I have to cook all the time. So I'm cooking every night.
Well, that's awesome.
I was just going to say, I know Scott's question was supposed to be the last question, but I have a burning question I've been wondering all episode. What exactly is going on the board behind you there?
Okay, so the half on this side, if I can point right, is still some leftover route stuff that I've kind of kept on here about, basically wide receiver routes and the steps that you take with some of those things. There's another play. I draw up a play or two a day where I just I don't try and commit into memory right now, but I just kind of draw it up to get familiar with the concept of where these things are supposed to go, so that when I see stuff, maybe it triggers. On this side now is those are chord changes to different tunes, because I was a musician in a past life, stopped playing for about 30 years, and last year, part of my get back and doing things to be healthy is getting myself to have to do things where I stand up. So I was a saxophone player. I studied music for about 2.5 years at the University of Miami, and I was for a short time in their jazz studies program there, and played a few gigs on a weekly basis, almost weekly, and did things like that. So I started playing again, and I took up the bass this summer.
Wow.
So I have a sax lesson tomorrow. I gotta go do with a local pro, but I'm learning tunes, and I've got to, so those are harmonies that I'm learning and writing them down, so I can kind of like get a feel for them, remember them, or just play through them over while I'm looking at them. So
I don't know if you have space in your brain, man.
I was gonna say it's good to have the analytical and the creative, but man, I don't know how you have room left in there. I'm with you. Well, hey, so come for the scouting takes, come for the dynasty talk, but stay for the chimichurri sauce on the cauliflower steak and the tunes that you're playing here. This is exactly what we love about the Junkies. We really appreciate your time, Matt. I know you've got a lot of work to do to get that thing put together, so any time we can get is definitely valuable. And we really appreciate you being in the ear tonight and giving us some new guys to talk about and think about.
I really appreciate it. And I just have one last thing I'd like to mention quickly is that with the
Sure.
RSP, for those of you who, appreciate, businesses giving back, one of the things that I've been doing since 2012 12 has been giving back to an organization called Darkness to Light. And they are one of the more highly rated charities on Charity Navigator. And their purpose and mission is to prevent childhood sexual abuse. And obviously it's a taboo subject. It's a difficult one to talk about. I know that, we've got a lot of people who give back, and, people bring that stuff up and you hear lots of retweets. But, when I retweet this one, I inevitably know that I'm going to get crickets on it, because it's a difficult topic. And people don't like to talk about it either because it's something that's occurred, or they know something that's happened, and it's a very difficult thing. But this organization does a great job on educating people on how to prevent it, whether it's civic organizations, sports teams, universities, public schools, individuals, you name it, as well as how to handle the issue when it does happen. Because unfortunately, some statistics even show that maybe as many as 1 out of 3 people have encountered or experienced this type of potential abuse in their life.
Wow.
And so it's one of those things that if one of the things that can happen that's most damaging isn't the actual act itself, as horrific as that seems, but it's the fact that because why it's so taboo isn't because it's, people like to characterize it as that creepy guy in the paneled van who's offering candy on the street to some kid, when it's actually a father or a mother or an uncle or a cousin or a brother or
someone
a
you
sister,
know and trust. Yep.
Someone you know and trust. And then what compounds this, unfortunately, is when the kid reports it and no one believes the kid. And then the kid has to continue to live in the situation. Even if that act has only happened once, the behaviors that created that act continue to happen over and over again. And then that's what really makes it hard for adults who finally do come to grips with this to work through it. So I would say being able to educate people on how to appropriately handle it, especially family members who want to mean well and sometimes screw it up, And so, someone who has seen how this has happened, and has known people in my life and seen how this has happened, both on the good end and the bad end, I can tell you it's a stark difference. It's the difference between some people having years of therapy and some people needing maybe months of therapy and being perfectly great and moving on from this, whereas some people are punishing themselves for a lifetime.
Well, no two brains are alike, right? And that is a great cause, and we're really glad that you could mention that. And I love that you do that. I know that that's something that you've done for, like you said, since 2012. You've done that for years, and I think that that's something that this community is really good at doing. I think is giving back. And I know Scott Fish obviously is tremendous at that. There's a lot of people, John Bosch and the Eliminators. I mean, there's everybody that puts
Fantasy
in charitable. Moose for sure. Yeah, you got the FF Face-Off guys with the Hayden Hurst Foundation. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different people trying to do a lot of good work. So that's what we're all here for. Is it's a good hobby, it's a good time, it's a good distraction, but we're here to help fix some of those real world things where we can too. And obviously that's a great cause. So really appreciate you bringing that up, Matt. And again, you're at Matt Waldman on Twitter. You go to mattwaldman.com, find all the stuff that you got, buy the RSP, but like Scott was saying, buy it,
don't read it
through
please.
It, but just put it aside, wait till after our drafts that we have together, then read it, and then find out why you need to trade for my players, because that's going to be
pre-order it. So Matt gets the money to buy some cauliflower steak, but then forget to, get
and reads for my saxophone.
Put in Scott's email.
And bass strings. That's about
right.
it. That's right. All I need is basically I just need the hamster to keep the wheel running.
That's right. That's right.
I need reeds. I need some bass strings. We're okay from there. And
well, hopefully we can help with some of that. Hopefully some of our listeners are going out right now and getting that. But again, Matt, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Oh man. All right. So we're going to go on with our Find Me a Trade. And I think this is one of those shows that just, it needs a little bit of a break. So let's just, that was a lot of terrific info. I got to be honest. That was great. So let me do this. Let me put the settings and everything like that. We've got a trade this week from one of our listeners. Actually, a listener who sent a couple of different leagues in, but Christian Crespo submitted this one. The league is a sleeper league, and it's called Another My Wife's Gonna Kill Me. I love that name for a league. I completely understand the logic on that one. His team name is Dak Knocks My Socks, which, again, love these team names that we get.
Great combo here.
Great combo. This one is a 10-team Dynasty Superflex PPR, 1.5 point tight end premium. So it's a 10-team with 23 roster spots. So it's, again, kind of shorter, not our usual depth.
It's actually closer to like an 11 team if you think about it. It's actually
Right.
it's start 10 was on here, but it's actually start 11. I was looking
It's
at
start 11. No, it's a 10 team, but start 11.
10 team
Yep.
start 11. Yeah.
Yep. And there's one QB, one running back, one receiver, one tight end, 6 flex, and a super flex. So it's a shallower roster, but a deeper start. I like that.
It's actually closer to a 12 team than typical 10 teams are. So you're still looking at it from the 12 team lens.
Yep. And I think if you're going to do a 10-team league, if I'm in a 10-team league, I want start 12, start 13. Like, let's make this, a little bit more fun. I mean, nothing wrong with the start 10 and 12 team, like you're saying, but if you're going to have fewer teams, you might as well have more players per team. So we'll bring up the team real quick. Let me see if I can get that pulled up. And if you actually, while I get that, Scott, if you want to read his comments about his team, that'd be a good segue for that.
For sure. All right, so Christian says, and this is something I noticed as well as I was trying to click from looking at the 21 teams and looking to these, I couldn't figure out who was who, and it's because they had a lot of orphans apparently. So I don't know why they didn't do a dispersal with that many orphans, but anyway, he took over an orphan team recently, trying to move some of the older guys like Amari Cooper, Mike Evans. He just traded Zeke for AJ Dillon, Adam Troutman, Kadarius Toney, and the 204. I like that trade. And traded Renfro for the 110. That's also a great flip. I like that a lot. Been trying to move Pat Freiermuth for another tight end and a draft pick because he doesn't believe in him. So that's fine. It's not your guy. Let's move on from him. And same with CEH, and that one I definitely agree with.
Yep. All right. So let's run down the team here real quick. I don't want to get too in the weeds. Obviously, it's a shorter team anyway, but we've got Dak Prescott at the QB, Josh Jacobs, AJ Brown, Pat Freiermuth, and then the flexes, at least for now, in the starting spots. We've got Amari Cooper, Dawson Knox, Mike Evans, AJ Dillon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Juju Smith-Schuster, and then Kyler Murray at the super flex. And again, in a 10-team league, I feel like you're looking at probably a little bit more depth. You don't need to be quite as crazy. But quarterback, he's got Daniel Jones, Mitchell Trubisky, and that's pretty much it, I recall. Then at running back, we've got Kenyan Drake, and there was one more, Jarrett Patterson, and that's it. So again, a little bit light at running back, in my opinion. Receiver, then we've got Robbie Anderson, Cedric Wilson, Mecole Hardman, Jalen Guyton, Kadarius Toney, who we mentioned before, and then some other guys on IR and stuff. We got Lynn Bowden, Sterling Shepard, and then tight end, we've got, obviously, outside the couple that we listed, we've got Albert Okwegbunam, Rob Gronkowski if he plays again, Brevin Jordan, John Bates, Dan Arnold, Trey McKitty, and Tommy Tremble. Isn't that Tommy Tremble? Mm-hmm. Anyway, he's got some depth there at some of those other positions, but as we can see, it's not necessarily the most top-heavy team. There are some really good players in here. But maybe, I guess, Rocky, do you want to do your trade first? And I know you had something specific you wanted to get into, so I don't want to keep it from anybody. I want them to hear what you got to say. Oh, you're muted too still. That's usually what I
bad.
Your turn.
All right.
My bad. I had kind of a lot going on here that I wanted to get into. So I guess maybe even before I get into my trade, it involves acquiring Debo. And that's kind of set me off on a little side tangent because I kind of threw it out in a chat, and everyone said that almost everyone said that the 101 was worth more than Debo. And I wanted I wanted to get your guys' take on Debo, but at first I just wanted to give. I think I am higher on him than most. He's wide receiver 10 in January ADP. They haven't done the February yet because MFL took a while to roll over.
Yeah, it's still going.
Yep.
And I get kind of why, because he's not as super young as like a Waddle and Chase, and he hasn't proven as much as like an Adams and Hill. So I kind of get it, but I still think he's a little undervalued right now. And I mean, some of the arguments I hear against him are, all that rushing work he got over the second half of the year.
Thank you very much.
But the question of will that keep up and that kind of thing. But I was looking at it, and it's funny. I think people forget how good of a wide receiver he was the first half of the year. I was looking at it. It actually breaks out almost perfectly. He played 8 games. He played 16 games total. They had a bye. So through week 9, he had 81 targets and only 6 rushes at that point. So 87 opportunities if you go targets plus running back touches. And was wide receiver 3 in the first 8 games when he barely ran the ball at all. And then In the second half of the year, it's almost exact. He had 93 combined targets and rushing attempts. So to me, what that says is this is a guy Shanahan wants to get the ball to however he can do it. So, and if you look in the playoffs, I didn't include that in the numbers, but he had 2 different games, I think, with double-digit rushes in the playoffs as well. So, and that's with Elijah Mitchell was healthy, I think, the whole playoffs. So
Yep.
I don't know that it's necessarily going to tail off. And even if it does, I think Shanahan's going to he got, like I said, it was 81 targets in the first 8 games he played. So it's 10 targets a game. It's 170 target pace over a 17-game season. So I think I may be valuing. And the other thing I hear too is the volume issue, especially with Lance taking over, that they won't throw the ball. But last year they only threw it 514 times anyway. Where do you think that placed in the league? It was 29th.
Oh, man.
So I mean, is it going to be that much lower than 29th in the league?
No.
So I think I'm valuing at least the people in this chat anyway. I'm valuing him higher than them. So I really liked. I was looking to kind of. I don't think this guy's roster is a championship like winning roster right off the bat, but I think he has some pieces, and I was looking to level up 10 teams. You want as many studs as possible, and I consider Debo in that stud range. I think this is like the new normal.
Yeah.
This isn't a blip.
Yeah.
So.
Well, hey, we're in a CKC startup right now, and where did Debo go? The startup doesn't lie. Debo went 310. Where did the rookie 101 go? 406, almost full round later.
There you go.
So there you go. The people of the Cool Kids Club have spoken, and there's no further need to discuss. It is Debo. It is not the 101. What are you doing? No.
Wait. But get into your trade, Rocky.
Yeah, the reason we're talking about the 101 is because the 101's involved in my trade. And what I was looking to do was kind of leverage that 101 aura, the mystery of the 101, the like people even in the like this class, the 101 I don't think is, all that valuable. Matt was kind of talking about earlier. None of these this is a super flex league. None of these quarterbacks project to be elite. It doesn't look like any of the running backs project to be elite. So try and leverage that 101. And another reason I wanted to do this too was because I agree. I want to get rid of maybe some of those older receivers as well. And especially if you don't think you're going to contend in 22. And one thing kind of pulling back and just talking on a macro level is a great way to get rid of them is to package them as an added value with a more attractive piece. If you try to sell Amari or you try and sell Evans, it's going to be a lot harder. You throw it in with the 101 and it makes it a lot easier. So
you got to make it shiny. Yeah,
yes,
I agree
exactly.
with you entirely. Yep.
So my trade was trying to trade. I would start with, I kind of had more of a framework than an actual trade because I have like 3 different offshoots of it, but it's trading the 101 and either Amari or Evans. I'd let the other guy pick to team its peeps for Debo, and I try for a 23 first. I don't know how tuned in these guys are. Maybe they don't even know how great the 23 first class is going to be. 23 first.
I mean, most people have never even heard it, so.
Maybe they're not listening to podcasts all the time and on Twitter.
You got to try. You got to try.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that the 23 first might be too much. My original idea was actually I would be okay with just doing I would add to it too if it's try and get that 23 first, by the way. I would throw in like a Clyde or something like that, or early second. I think he has the 204. But my original trade was actually, and this is the one I threw out in that chat, was Debo and or trade 101 and one of the receivers for Debo and 109, which the other guy has. And I would even be okay with that. Not that the 109 is going to be great, but you're dropping down. You're still getting the 109. He also has the 110. You can still build up your receivers with those picks as well. Kind of don't worry about the running backs because you're probably not competing this year. And it's peeps. He that looks like because Sleeper shows you if it's been traded. So that 109 was his, which means he was in the title game. But
that's right.
His because it's a 10-team league.
Yep.
But his quarterbacks are like a mess. And I can see how they would have worked sort of okay last year, but he literally has no one that you can guarantee. You can tell a story that none of his quarterbacks is a starting quarterback there. He's got Rodgers, Taysom, Fitzpatrick, both of the crappy Pittsburgh backups, Drew Lock, Davis Mills, Tyrod Taylor. So I mean, there's a chance he could get two or maybe even three. I doubt that, but there's a chance he could get 2 starters out of there. But he may have 0.
Well,
so,
but also just to kind of piggyback on that guy's got 9 quarterbacks. He's got 9 quarterbacks on his roster, and I'm with you. It's like, do you need 9 quarterbacks on a roster of 23 when we're got like Dwayne Haskins, Drew Lock, Sam Ellinger? Like, I gotta be honest,
when they're
man,
those guys, you do, yeah.
Well, true, but like Taysom Hill, Ryan Fitz,
this is like Rocky's strategy on steroids.
Right.
Yeah.
When Rocky thinks you need quarterbacks, you need quarterbacks.
Exactly. So that's what I was thinking. You know, he may be interested in the 101. He can get any quarterback he wants. You know, whatever one is his choice of top quarterback. And he also is stacked at wide receiver. He's got Diggs, he's got Adams, he's got McLaurin, Hopkins. You know, is getting up there, but he still, you know, could produce this year. So Debo is kind of somewhere in there where he could afford to down. He's not even losing Debo. He's just downgrading to Amari or Evans. So I think it makes a lot of sense on his end too. And as a team that's probably trying to compete again after losing in the championship game, it seems like with the 109, he might not mind taking on an older guy and getting the 101. You know, he's not just getting an old guy, he's getting a rookie in the 101 that can upgrade his quarterback spot. So that's all my thinking.
Well, that's a lot of thinking, and I like it. But the thing I wanted to mention is that now is the time to do that, though, because it's still February technically when we're recording this, right? We still got time for that 101 to accrue value. Right, there are definitely players out there that look at this and go, "Well, the 101 is going to go up. I might as well trade away
anything."
Debo.
Andrew, it could even be a boat.
It could be a boat. I love that. I'm right there with you. I love that because here's the funniest part about this: there are people, and I don't know how active this is, but there are people in leagues that I'm in that would make this kind of trade, even though it makes no sense value-wise or roster-wise or anything, just to have the 101 to then have it on the clock and to send it away. Like they would literally trade for the 101 just to kind of tout it and be like, it's on the clock. Who wants it? Come and get it. And then it's crickets. We've all seen it where everyone's like, no, you can go ahead. You know, it's all yours. It's all yours. But like, so it's you got to be careful. But I like the idea of trading it away now while I think it has some value to add, right? Where somebody on the other side sees it as extra shiny. I love that idea. And then Debo, I mean, who knows where that offense is going to be next year? I mean, I
think as we get closer to the draft, it could even, as more people learn more about these prospects, I think it could lose some of its luster. Like I've just, I'm not mad. I don't have to put out an RSP. So I've just in the past week or two been kind of diving into some of these guys more and watching them on film and all that.
The best part is like when you're like, yeah, he's just terrible at throwing. And you're like, yeah, fucking Rocky from Philadelphia thinks he's terrible at throwing. That was the best.
I've been diving into these guys more. I've looked at a bunch of the quarterbacks. I'm starting to get into the running backs, and it is not exciting. if you're and I think people are going to hear more about that. You know, I mean, you kind of heard it already, but I think as we get even closer, it's just going to be like, wow, none of these guys. I don't want to pick 101.
Well, so, if the best case scenario is low end QB1, like that's the best case scenario. That's not saying a lot. Right. Like that's not what we're used to. The last 4 or even 5 years really in Dynasty has been kind of,
at least a couple.
We've been lucky. We've been really blessed to have some great classes. So,
and with the trade, if this guy values Debo the way that chat did, it might be a no brainer for him. Like to me, it was, I liked it because even with the 109, because to me, it was like, I'll take Debo over the 101 and I'm fine selling Amari or Evans for the 109. So, sure. But if this guy, like we said, right now, still seeing the 101 is shiny, new. He's maybe not as high on Debo as some other people. He might be because he had him on his roster all year. But I think it could get done, especially, like I said, especially with the 109, which I'd still be fine doing. But I would pay up to try and pry the 23 off of him.
And one more note before we move on. I think we've done a terrific job of beating this dead horse. The only reason I would say that this might not work is because he's only got 6 receivers, right? He's a little shallow at receivers. So this is one of those, it's Peeps only has 6. And so if he's giving up Debo,
he may only have 6, but 5 of them are starters. So
correct. No, and I agree. They're all starters. So it's the opposite. What I was going to say is the opposite of this guy's situation, Christian's situation, where he's got a lot of starting running, not a lot, but like he's got starting running backs, but no depth after that. It's kind of the same the other way, right?
Yeah.
So like,
and he's getting a startable wide receiver, but either one is,
Yeah.
and then, like I said, I would give him his choice. Like it makes it maybe even more enticing for him. Like I'll give you your choice. You can have Amari or Evans. I don't care.
Yep. Oh, I like that. All right, Scott, what about your trade? Where did you go with this?
Okay, so I'm just gonna rant for 13 seconds because Kyler Murray is a guy that I've been trying to move off of since the end of the season, and I'm like really super annoyed that all these negative stories are coming out because now nobody wants to trade for him, and it's just really pissing me off. But what I did here is I packaged two polished turds to try to get one better player here. And so I put together Kyler Murray and the amazing CEH to the team LaManfran for Lamar Jackson and the 104. Kyler's still going ahead of Lamar in startups. And so although CKC, good job. Lamar went, I think, 6 and Kyler was 9, something like that. But again, they're real close, right? And January DLF still has Kyler up. Maybe that'll adjust a little bit here when we get to February. But regardless, even if they're close, I would think if you're moving, we often talk about, moving within a tier and getting a piece, right? So we don't know how LaManfran feels about CEH, but if he feels this rookie class is weak, then he would say, maybe I'd take CEH and I'm essentially just moving from Lamar to Kyler, but I'm getting a CEH and I'll take that. And then for me personally, I'd rather have Lamar than Kyler. And so I'm getting the better quarterback in my opinion. And I'm re-rolling with CEH if I want to take another one with 104, but really I would take this the second level considering he's already made some moves and probably looking to make more than just one trade. He's not just going to make one trade and then, okay, he's done, right? But that'll give him 3 top, I think 8 picks or 3 top. Does he have 101 and 108?
He has 101 and 110.
And 110. Okay, so he'll have three top 10 picks, 3 first round picks, right? That then he could take that and package to do whatever he wants to do with. And again, maybe it helps him move one of those older wide receivers. Maybe then he adds that in to get the 23 first with Rocky's trade, right? Yep. He could possibly cascade a couple of these deals together here, and getting picks is just getting currency to be able to move around, right? When you're stuck with a player, it is what it is. Somebody has to like him. And so, if you can move CEH and get a pick now that you can move around and use as currency, I much prefer that.
Well, it gives you more
especially
flexibility.
in February.
Yeah, it gives you more flexibility, right? It gives you some more ability to kind of package something together for a guy you really like. And the other thing that I think we all know, and this is kind of odd, but still very true, and I don't know if it really gets talked about, but the worst value drop you're going to see on a pick is when it gets picked, right? Whoever, like if you're, as soon as that pick becomes a player, its value drops 20%. It's almost like as soon as you take that car off the lot, you know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing. So you want to trade those things if you can before you get to the draft. If you're really trying to move them, now is the time, right? Now is the time to strike. And I think that's actually a very fine trade. I actually looked at the LaManfran team as well, because he's got guys like Barkley and Elliott and Singletary and Montgomery. Like, he's got a ton of good running backs, which I think is, again, what I think this team needs, what Christian's team is lacking. But I think, again, the Kyler to Lamar move, I could see somebody looking at that and saying, well, Lamar kind of struggled a little bit. This Kyler hype, I don't know, 104. I mean, who am I getting? Is that better than CEH? Like, I like that logic. Yeah. And there is somebody out there that'll do that. I don't think I would do it. I'd probably rather have the Kyler side myself. But again, I mean, there are other people that would disagree and would rather have Lamar side.
Well, that's what makes it a good trade, right? I mean,
exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
My only issue is I just worry if you can pull the 104 with it, just because.
Oh, really?
I do. Yeah, I do think Kyler and Lamar are pretty close.
I think
the negative Kyler news doesn't help though, CEH to me is like late first, early second value at this point. Like, I've had
even in this class though.
I think people would probably rather.
I mean, he was the 101 2 years ago. I mean, it's
I just think people hate CEH right now.
Yeah, they do, and they're right. I mean, but
I don't love him. I've been more of a CEH defender than most, but I'm even waning a little bit. But I think you might need to. Like I said about the 23 first earlier, I might be able to add another piece.
Actually.
I might try and add even another smaller piece in there. So maybe your 20. I think he has 204, something like that. I'd be willing to throw in the 204.
Yeah, 204.
With DH and Kyler. Yeah.
Or 301,
Something like
whatever
that.
you need.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep, I don't
Always
mind
be
that.
willing to add those later picks.
I don't mind that. Yeah. So I'll get into mine unless you guys have more you want to get into on that one. I think that was a pretty fair trade. Mine was a little bit smaller. I know that's why I wanted to go with mine last because it's not quite as flashy. But in my head, I'm looking at this team thinking, what do I need? And it's tough to talk about need at this time of year. We always say trade away running backs. But I think that there are some running backs and some receivers even out there that are undervalued that are going to have a value bump. And so as much as I don't like trading for running backs, I don't mind trading away players that could see a bump up or down even. So my logic was I'm going to trade Juju and Cedric Wilson or some other bench receiver because you got a bunch of them, but Juju and a bench receiver to this team named Hickey for Miles Sanders and Curtis Samuel. And the logic here is I think eventually Miles Sanders will have more value and score more points than Juju will if Juju is in the wrong spot. If Juju Smith-Schuster goes to the Chiefs, that's his upside. That's what you're trading on the ability in free agency for him to go to somewhere. But he might stay with Pittsburgh and struggle. He might retire. We have no idea. Like there are literally so many things he could do. He could go to Chicago and be a dud, right? We don't know. I think Miles Sanders is going to be okay. I don't think he's going to be great, but I'm not trying to give you the jinx there, Bears fan, but I'm just saying there is some talk that Juju is not going to be that great. So I think you could trade on.
Hasn't been mentioned to the Bears.
Yeah, right, because they need it. But who knows where he goes? So there is someone out there, I'm sure, that is looking at him like he could be a boat, right? Like we were just talking about, like, he could go somewhere awesome. You were
saying that,
right? And so he could be amazing, but we don't know that.
He could go anywhere. He could even go to Pittsburgh.
He could stay where he stayed last year, right? So as much as I like Juju and I love acquiring him for the right cost, I feel like people are kind of down on Miles Sanders, but he's a terrific RB2 option, just like Juju's a good wide receiver 3 option. And I think that gives you some flexibility. And then adding Curtis Samuel is someone I'm trying to add in almost every league too, just because he was hurt last year. He was out for most of the time. Nobody really remembers him, but he could be a sleeper that sees your lineup with a 6 flex like this. You got to get really creative in some weeks. So I don't know. What do you think about that one, Rocky? Am I way off base, or is that a fair trade that you feel like would work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty fair. I think Miles Sanders, and I think I've said this, if not here, then definitely on Trade Addicts, that Miles Sanders, I think, is underrated at this point. Everybody
right now
hates,
he is. Yeah.
Everybody hates Miles Sanders the way they hate CEH. So, and I think there is still upside there. They started to use him more towards the end of last year, like more exclusively before he got hurt again. He had 220 plus yard rushing games. He just didn't score any friggin' touchdowns last year, even though the team scored like a whole bunch of rushing touchdowns, even outside of Jalen Hurts. They scored a fair amount, and none of them were Miles Sanders for some reason. So we know they're a running team. That's probably going to continue next year, especially if Hurts is still the quarterback. So I like getting Miles Sanders, and I agree. I don't. It's just like you said, it's a smaller deal, but I do like the side that you're getting. This guy's getting more. I think Miles Sanders is more likely to see that, unless Juju goes to like Kansas City or something. I think Miles Sanders is more likely to see an eventual value bump than Juju is. And I'll take Samuel over Wilson too.
Yeah, I think now before free agency is the time to move Juju if you're going to move him. If you really feel like he's going to go somewhere, then you keep him. But I think if you're trying to trade on that what if, now is the time, right before he signs somewhere. Scott, are you on the same page? Am I on the right track here?
Well, listen, if you want to hear my thoughts on Juju, you can check out the Commissioner Evaluation Day Trader show with myself and John McGlynn that we recorded this morning.
There you go.
Talk about how much we hate Juju. And no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, Juju's just weird, man. Like he's loyal and he's different, and he just re-signing with Pittsburgh. So weird. Kansas City offers you like play with Patrick Mahomes or play with I don't, the Jets. Okay. I get it, but Kansas City, why, so, hey, who knows what's going to happen with him. I'm cool with trading him. So yeah, that's fine. And throw in somebody else. I mean, you're kind of moving some guys right now that, I feel like you're kind of getting rid of the guys that had a name like Juju for maybe guys that could, even though you could say the same about Curtis Samuel or maybe even Miles Sanders. But I think you're right that those guys are going to have more production And at the end of the day, let's move the name for the production. And so I understand that standpoint. I personally, I'm going the route of, I'm not worrying about running backs right now because I'm not at that stage to compete, and I'll add those guys in later. But at the same time, a productive running back could get you another piece that you need, or whatever you want.
That's
to
kind
do.
of what
So
I mean. It's not just any running back. I think it's a running back that I think will see their value accrue, and that's the point. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, totally,
yep.
totally. And we're trying to buy value this year. This time of year.
And by the way, just to sort of maybe tie it on a bow, I just think it's kind of great. A lot of times we'll do these, with the two of us and the guest or whatever, and we'll all kind of be on the same track. I mean, he could actually throw out all three of these trades in some form, and potentially get them all done. So hopefully that happens for you, Christian. Yeah.
Usually we come up with like one trade with three variations. These are three very different trades. Yes. Well, hopefully that helps, Christian. Hopefully you can get something done. Definitely let us know. Tag us on Twitter if you get any of those polls or any of those trade talks there. But guys, I got to be honest, this is a hell of a show. We had a whole long show today. So appreciate you sticking with us. All those that are in the chat.
Yeah,
obviously,
Matt
Calvin,
stayed even
John,
longer than we thought.
Ridley Truther. We got a bunch of people that have been with us. And if you're still listening in podcast form, obviously you're a junkie. You're just like the rest of us. You're addicted. But with that, we are going to wrap it up finally and get going off of this. So I'll start with the usual. We are all three of us on, which is a little different, and I kind of like it. We should do this more often. But I'm at Andrew Hall FF, Rocky at Dynasty FF Addict, Scott Sidlow at Scott_Sidlow. Follow all three of us. Hit us up with anything you need. Follow the Junkies podcast as well, Dynasty Junkies on Twitter at Dynasty Junkies. Follow the DAP Network at DAP_Network for when we go live. You get alerts for that. Also, you get all the other DAP Network shows like Trade Addicts and Fantasy Timeline and Get Real. Make sure that you subscribe to us on all the podcasting platforms. Leave feedback, leave notes, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review entirely blank. I don't mind that. Just give us whatever you can do to kind of boost us up. We got a lot of great guests coming up. I think next week we're still planning on having Heath Cummings. We've got Jordan McNamara on the books. So we've got some really good names coming up. But if there's anything you guys want to see or anything you want to hear differently, please let us know. But make sure that, just keep interacting with us. That's the whole thing. I'll kick it to you, Rocky, to then kick it to Scott to close us out. So go ahead, Rocky.
Say, don't kick it to me. Scott's so much better at closing us out than I am. So I'll just say, I'm glad to have gotten to do this with you two guys tonight. We don't do the three of us often enough. We'll be doing it, I think, coming up in March as well. So that'll be fun. But Scott, just go ahead. I'm thank you to Matt Waldman. But Scott,
yes, thank you to Matt Waldman for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That was pretty special. Matt's a different guy, man. I love him. So that was very cool. For all the homies in the comments, for amazing guest Matt Waldman, for our fearless leader Rocky, for the greatest host ever Andrew Hall, I'm Scott Sidlow.